Okay guys, keeping you up to date on my Manjaro KDE journey. It has been around 10 days now that I've been living in Manjaro's KDE edition full-time on my main production machine here at home. What are my thoughts on it? Well, I love Manjaro. Love Manjaro. I have no complaints about Manjaro as a Linux distribution at all. KDE, I don't love KDE. In a lot of ways, KDE is not a desktop environment for someone like me. I've gotten used to using minimal, lightweight desktop environments and window managers. I don't like the slow speeds of everything in KDE. I don't like some of the crashing that goes on in KDE sometimes. Sometimes I have programs crash on me. It's not often, but I've had a few crashes since running KDE. I also had one hard crash of the KDE desktop environment where I had to actually physically power off my desktop and restart the machine because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even get to a TTY command prompt to fix the issue. So that's how serious of a crash that was. So again, loving Manjaro, not really loving KDE so far, but I'm going to stick with it for a little while longer. So let's discuss some of the things I've tinkered with since my last KDE, Manjaro KDE journey video, which was about 5 days ago. Again, I don't tinker with my desktop that much. I don't play around with a lot of the theming and icons and all that. Really, the only thing I've changed, I think, since the last time I made a video was I did add a photo of myself here in KDE's menu here. Let me see if I click on that. Yeah, it launches the user program here, and my username is Derek, and I was able to add a photo of myself. So that's pretty cool. This photo, when you add it, appears in the menu here in KDE. It also appears in the login manager when you log in. So if you have a computer with multiple users, that's really neat because when you switch users in the login manager, if all of them have their own, photo or some kind of, picture or whatever, it's easy to tell, you're logging in as your user. So that'd be pretty cool for those of you, using like a family computer with multiple users. I really enjoy the look and feel of KDE as far as how attractive a desktop it is. I mean, that is really one of the big selling points for KDE is it's an attractive desktop. It just is. It's really a gorgeous desktop. That being said, I mean, GNOME 3 is an attractive desktop. Budgie is an attractive desktop. You can make Mate into a very nice looking desktop. Same with the Cinnamon. And those desktops are a little bit different in that, well, KDE is attractive, but it has some quirks to it. Like the panel at the bottom of the screen is a really sharp looking panel. But some of the way the icons are sized and spaced, the way the clock, the font and everything, the size of it, the padding and all, the panel, it just looks a little bit off. There's just something a little strange about everything in KDE, a little off-putting, that you don't find in other desktop environments like GNOME, XFCE, Unity even, So I don't know exactly how to explain that, but again, there's just something a little off with some of the design, the spacing and font sizes and such. For example, this default clock here, this is not the default clock. I've set it to show time and date, but the default clock just shows the time, and it is a gigantic font, for this panel. I mean, it takes up the whole height of the panel here, which looks odd. Let me see if I can reset this to the default to show you what I'm talking about. So let me, what I did is I right-clicked on this. This is called the Digital Clock applet, and I went to Digital Clock Settings, and I've got it to show date by default. Let me tick that off and click Apply, and it doesn't change anything. I'm not sure why that didn't change. So I don't know what's going on with that applet. Maybe the next time I log out and log back in it'll change, but I don't know why it just wouldn't change the time and date format immediately. I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense why that wouldn't just change right away. So never mind, I won't show you that. One of my gripes about the KDE desktop environment in my previous video was the system settings, some of the user settings and configuration of KDE. You know, it was hard to find some of the customization options in KDE. This system settings menu here is a little confusing. For example, in my previous video, I played around with the input devices. Input devices is down here. Under input devices, you have some subcategories. What you would expect: keyboard, mouse, joystick, touchpad, you know, input devices. What you wouldn't expect is that, say under mouse here, it includes options for like whether double click or single click opens files and folders in the Dolphin file manager. Why is that setting under input devices? Why is that not a setting inside the Dolphin file manager itself? I mean, this is not where you would expect something like that. It's not where I would expect something like that. I seriously doubt it's where a new KDE user or a new Linux user in general would expect to find a setting for this. So just some strange choices on how a lot of the settings manager menu is set up. For example, I mentioned I really hated the animations and the slow speed of KDE compared to what I was used to before. OpenBox, I used OpenBox before, where menus, you right click on the desktop, the menu just instantly appears. No lag at all. You open a program, it just opens. You close a program, it just closes. You minimize a window, it's gone. There's no, you know, fading in and out or sliding or any of that stuff. None of those, you know, graphical goodies that you get with desktop environments like KDE. So I was thinking, you know what, I want to turn all that stuff off. So I'm just going to turn off compositing completely. Okay, well, where is the option to turn the compositor off? I mean, is it under desktop behavior? So maybe under desktop effects? That would make sense. Click desktop effects. No. You do have options for some of the KDE effects here, but nothing about compositing. Window management? I mean, maybe it would be under there. No. Where is the compositor? Well, you can search up here. Let me search for compositor. C-O-M-P-O-S-I. Okay. And the settings manager crashed. Here's what I'm talking about with occasional crashes. I actually didn't expect that to do this on this video, but I have had that happen a couple of times in the settings manager, where you go to search for something, you start typing, and the settings manager crashes. So let me open up the settings manager again. Let me type compositor again. Okay, and I get to compositor. It's under displays and monitor. I mean, is that really the best place for the compositing? I think desktop effects probably makes more sense. That's where I would look first, but hey, you know, at least they have a search field here. You can search for it. And enable compositor is enabled by default, of course. I can tick that off, and then the next time well, actually I don't even have to log out and log in. I just click apply, and compositing is turned off now. Or is it? I still have the fade effect. Yeah, I think I do have to log out and back in. But anyway, without the compositor, I've actually already tried this, turning the compositor off, living without the compositor. Major screen tearing without the compositor. You know, just standard stuff like the Dolphin file manager or a terminal. The compositor is still on here. I need to log out and back in. And I'm not going to do that right now, but major screen tearing. I mean, it just leaves artifacts all over the screen. Not so bad with something like the file manager or terminal, but more CPU and memory intensive programs. If I opened up GIMP, which opens up several windows at a time, I could be using 4 or 5 different windows inside GIMP, playing around with some image editing, and you start moving some of those around and it just leaves crud all over your screen. It leaves artifacts everywhere to the point where it's frustrating to use. So I actually had to turn the compositor back on after living without the compositor for a couple of days. You really are going to have to use some kind of compositor in KDE. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with some major screen tearing and artifacts. Another minor gripe I've had really since day one living in KDE. I haven't mentioned it on a video yet because, I mean, that's not, you know, like a deal breaker for me, but I just opened up a terminal. This is KDE's console. And say I want to open up the Dolphin File Manager, you know, in my root directory. Well, to do anything in the root directory, I also need to log in as the root user. I mean, you just have to. Otherwise, viewing the root directory, all you're going to do is just be able to navigate and just read stuff. You're not going to be able to edit anything, add anything, delete anything. So, sudo Dolphin to open Dolphin as the root user. Give it my password. Executing Dolphin as root is not possible. Why is that not possible? And I know that in previous versions of KDE I've used, you could open the Dolphin File Manager as root. Why have they removed that feature? I'm not sure. I mean, I'm guessing they think it's a security feature, but okay, it asked me for a root password. I gave it my root password, meaning I know the root password, the system administrator password. You should just let me do whatever I want to do in my system at that point. I've already told you I want super user privileges. Just let me have Dolphin as root. Dolphin is not the only graphical application that will not be run as root. Kate, the text editor in KDE. Sudo Kate. Executing Kate as root is not possible. To edit files as root, use sudo _editor equals Kate space sudo edit and then the name of the file. So it does give you a command that you can get Kate open as root, but why doesn't just sudo Kate execute that command? I mean, why do I have to jump through some weird hoop to get Kate open as root? It just doesn't make any sense. In the last couple of days, I played around with the idea of installing some kind of backup program, some kind of backup utility on my Manjaro KDE install. And a program I'm kind of familiar with, I've used before in the past, is a program called Timeshift. So, Timeshift is in the Manjaro repos. So I installed Timeshift here. Let me open up Timeshift. Now, Timeshift asks for my super user password, my root password, because to back up and restore, you know, your system, obviously you need to be root. Alright, so I've already made one backup here in Timeshift. Let me highlight it. Now say I want to view this backup. Let me click the browse button here. Okay, a little bouncing icon like it's about to open something, and then nothing. And we can wait here all day, nothing's going to open. And this got me to thinking, why is that not working? Well, this browse button, as you might expect, is going to take us somewhere in our directory structure where it's saving these Timeshift backup files. And it makes sense, it's probably going to be the file manager taking us there. Well, Timeshift, we gave it a root password, right? You have to run Timeshift as root. So when you click browse here, Timeshift is opening Dolphin File Manager. It's also going to try to open Dolphin as root. Dolphin will not execute as root. So that's not possible here in Timeshift. So that's a bummer there. Alright, the last gripe I'll have about the KDE desktop environment. Let me open up the KDE panel here. Let me go to applications. Let me go to a subcategory that's got a lot of applications in it. Let's go to system. Now let's say I want to scroll through this system. I'm used to using the mouse wheel for scrolling. I use the mouse wheel to scroll in a web browser. I use the mouse wheel to scroll through large amounts of text in the terminal. I'm going to use the mouse wheel to scroll through most menus. Look at me using the mouse wheel as fast as I can in this menu, and it is painstakingly slow. To the point it's not even usable. There's no point in using the mouse wheel if the scroll speed is that slow. I don't know how to fix that. And I had at least one comment on my YouTube channel, another KDE user asking, how do we fix these slow mouse scroll speeds? I don't know. I looked around. I didn't see any real answers. Maybe you KDE users, you longtime KDE users, have some kind of fix for me and the viewers that are wondering the same thing, because that really needs to be fixed. That's unacceptable to have, that scroll speed set to that glacial speed. The positive I have about the KDE desktop environment is not the desktop environment itself, but the suite of apps, the KDE apps, are outstanding. I love the Dolphin File Manager. I've mentioned that in many of my videos about KDE, how I think the Dolphin File Manager is probably the best file manager available on Linux, even though it won't let me open it as root, but that's a minor gripe. And maybe KDE has plans to do something about that in a future release. I love the default terminal, the console terminal. I love the default text editor, the Kate text editor. Video editing. All of my videos prior to installing Manjaro KDE on my production machine were edited in a program called Pitivi. I really like Pitivi. It's, fully functional and easy to use. I had never used Kdenlive, but I knew that by default, being a KDE program, Kdenlive would be the video editor installed on Manjaro KDE. So I had made the decision I was going to start editing all my videos in Kdenlive just to try it out. And Kdenlive, let me open it. Kdenlive has been fantastic. I really like Kdenlive to the point where, regardless of what desktop environment or window manager I end up using long term down the road, assuming I don't stick with KDE, I am going to stick with using Kdenlive. It's fantastic. The one thing I will mention about Kdenlive is I rendered a video the other day, a recent video of mine on my channel. It was 25 minutes in length. It took right at 3 hours to render that video, and I couldn't figure out, why is this taking so long to render? I opened up a system monitor and it was maxing out one core on my CPU and not using any of the other 5 cores. I've got a 6-core CPU. It's like, why is it only using one core of my CPU? That doesn't make any sense. Almost every computer these days is a multi-core processor, and the point of having all those cores is to get more work done in a faster time. So I found this setting here in the menu where you settings and configure Kdenlive, and you click on environment, I think. Yep, environment. You have processing threads here. This is set to 1 by default, and it says here in parentheses that anything over 1 is experimental. So they set it to 1 by default. Well, I went ahead and just set that to 6 processing threads, and that greatly increased the render time, where instead of a 3-hour render time for that 25-minute video, now it finishes in under an hour and a half, so more than double the speed. So you guys that are using Kdenlive and don't know about that setting, you have like a quad-core processor or a 6 or 8-core processor, yeah, give it more process threads and you'll be a lot happier with the render time. And I'll leave it at that for this video. Again, my Manjaro KDE journey, 10 days into it, mostly positive. Again, I love Manjaro. I've always loved Arch Linux, so Manjaro is, Arch, with a little bit more stability probably, because they hold some packages back slightly, a couple of weeks or so. And I've had no breakages or anything with Manjaro at all. The 3 months I lived in a virtual machine with it, no issues. The week and a half or so I've lived on physical hardware, no issues. So Manjaro, I've got no complaints about the Manjaro distribution. I'm not sure long term if KDE is the right desktop environment for me. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty positive it's not. It's just when you get so used to using a fast, minimal window manager or a desktop environment, it's hard to go back to something like GNOME or KDE with, their slow speeds, their sluggishness. For example, you guys, most of you Linux users probably were Windows users at one time. Do you remember the first time you used Linux, how much faster it was than that installation of Windows XP, Windows 7, whatever, whenever you switched? And you were just blown away at the speed of Linux compared to Windows. Even something like KDE right here, just blows the performance of something like Windows 10 completely out of the water. You would never want to go back to Windows after having used Linux, right? Well, it goes the same way with desktop environments inside Linux. Once you get used to using fast window managers like OpenBox, Fluxbox, Joe's Window Manager, tiling window managers like Xmonad, i3, man, it is hard. You spend, a few years and something like that, and you go back to something like KDE, and it's like, it's slow as molasses compared to what you were used to, and it's hard to get comfortable, with some of that. So I'm not sure, again, long term, will I be a KDE user? Probably not. But again, I'm going to stick with KDE for a while. That was the purpose of this, is to use something I'm not that comfortable with, not that familiar with. So I'll probably keep you guys updated, maybe do another Manjaro KDE journey video in a few days, maybe a week or two. So peace.